Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 255 on January 5th. It is officially 2025. Happy New Year, Don.
Happy New Year, Terry, and to all our listeners.
Yep. So we got an interesting show for you, for everyone today. We've seen, both of us have been consulting over the holidays. We got the start of a new year. It's brought some maybe some reflections, and I might even ask you for a couple goals that you might have thought about. I know you're not a New Year's resolution fan, but you're very goal-oriented. And this is also the first episode we are going to release the Higgins Hot Seat segment, brought to you by 360 Blinds. So you have no idea what I'm going to say. Some weeks it's going to maybe be something to poke you a little bit and get you fired up. Other ones it might be a little bit funnier. But you're going to have to be on the spot, and you have committed to answering the question no matter what it is. I might even ask you if it's boxers or briefs today. You never know.
Well, that ought to be interesting.
That's not today's question, so we don't have to worry about that.
I'm guessing some of our listeners could probably help you out a little bit. You know what? Before we get rolling, I got something to share with you.
Yeah.
So I was on a consulting visit with some good old boys from Indiana, and they started talking about the king buck. And, you know, we started talking about how we was going to set up our trail cameras and such. And, you know, you was saying how it's, you can't tell if it's the king buck if you're only getting him from the side. Well, these guys got a way to tell if it's the king buck, Terry. They've got a measuring system. Supposedly, if you stick your finger in the deer's bunghole and then you put your arm down, if his jewels hang below your elbow, then it's the king buck for that area. That's just what these guys from Indiana told me. So, I'm not a king buck fanatic, so.
Are they Purdue grads? That sounds like something West Elks would come up with.
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you this, that one of these guys brought me a cherry pie that his wife baked, and I'll tell you what, it was a fantastic cherry pie, and I don't know anything about the king buck, but these guys do know how to bake cherry pies, or their wives know how to bake cherry pies anyway, so there you go. That's how you know if it's the king buck.
Well,
you got a measuring system now.
There's now multiple theories on the king buck and aging deer, so we now have that. We'll keep all these locked away for maybe a fake news article that we can write about the most ludicrous ways to age a buck. Maybe that would be a good blog or article to write for Whitetail Life magazine. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what. I've seen some new personalities, I'll put it that way, pop up on social media here lately. And Mr. King Buck has got some competition. There's another guy out there, I'll just call him a guy, that he's got some pretty ridiculous ideas of his own. So, Mr. King Buck, you may be the king of the mountain right now, but you got somebody challenging you.
Well, we always said people had to find their niche, right? So people are trying to find their niche, whatever works for them. So both of us have been consulting, and we talk about this all the time, how awesome people are to us. I was up in Ohio, and usually I try to take the client out to lunch, but I got to this place up in Ohio, and this family cooked this humongous spread for us and had a hot meal waiting for us halfway through the visit, and had, dessert, and man, people roll out the red carpet for us. It is absolutely amazing and not expected. We don't want to make it people feel like they have to do this, but doggone it, people are rolling out the red carpet for us. It means a lot. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's why it's so hard for me to retire or slow down even, because every day I just feel like I've made new friends. and they treat me so good. I just said the cherry pie thing. I promise you, before this spring's over, I'm probably going to be sick of cherry pie because I'm going to have so many cherry pies sent my way. But it's not about cherry pies. It's just about how good these people are. And, I tell all my clients, if you're traveling through my area and get a chance, holler at me and I'll meet you for lunch along your route or something. But these people truly become friends. It's just fantastic. Yep. I don't know why I would even think about retiring, really.
Well, this first segment of the podcast, before we go to Ossia break, I wanna dissect a little bit about things we saw, and I had a couple very interesting takeaways that I want to bring up to you and pick your brain about. But I want you to start with it. I know you were on a few more visits than I was, but anything stick out, maybe just as a talking point that you observed or saw? Outside of the camper in the sky that I saw you post a picture of. That was kind of interesting.
Well, I think the thing that really has struck me is that the typical client is very much like the typical deer hunter today, in that they look at their property the same way they would if they had permission on a property. And I don't think they understand the huge advantage that land ownership gives them. It gives them the ability to do whatever they want with that property. And the typical deer hunter, he looks at a property, and it doesn't matter if he's hunting public land, private land, he owns it, permission, whatever. And he's looking for the best place on that property to hang his stand based on what he sees. And it's really struck me that I'm looking at something totally different. I'm looking at where can we create the best stand sites that are going to benefit us, the hunter, instead of just taking what the property gives us, taking what's there today. I'm looking at what can we create, what stand sites can we create that's going to give us a great chance of success while putting very minimal pressure on that property. And when day after day I'm sharing this with the client, it just strikes me that, these guys don't understand that they've got such a huge advantage by owning a property, that there's all kinds of things they can do to manipulate deer movement, to get the deer to move past the spot where they want the deer to move past. And too often, I think a deer hunter goes out there and he's looking at, okay, what are the deer doing today? I want to take advantage of what these deer are doing today. I want to find the best spot for my stand today. And I'm looking at it totally different. It's like, what can I do on this property? What terrain features, or, what other benefits or advantages does this property give me that I can take advantage of to get a deer to walk past a tree that I can get to without alerting deer, and I can get out of it without spooking deer, and low intrusion. It's a lesson that I try to instill day after day with these clients is we got to keep the bucks bedded on your property. We got to get them, the bucks that we want to target and shoot. We got to get those bedded on your property, not your neighbors, not passing through your property, not bedded a mile away or wherever. We got to get them bedded right there on your property. And then once we get them bedded on your property, we got to keep them bedded there. We can't just bust into the middle of the property and, hunt a stand that's very intrusive, where our odds of spooking that deer are pretty good. We're way better off to be conservative. And I tell my clients day after day, I'm probably the most conservative deer hunter you're ever going to meet. But if I can keep that deer bedded on your property day after day after day after day,
right,
sooner or later, we're going to get him killed at one of these locations where we're stacking odds in our favor. And so I was on a property in Ohio a couple days ago, and in Ohio, you can feed or bait throughout the season. Well, you can just use a feeder as another reason to get a deer coming past your stand. But I'm trying to stack reasons for that deer to come back past your stand. I'm not just wanting to have one or two reasons to be there. Just a feeder in front of a tree yeah, that gives him one reason to be there, but I want to stack the odds. I want he's coming past this feeder because this terrain feature pushes him past this tree. I can get to this tree very easily without being detected. I can slip out very easily without being detected. And then I throw a feeder there. I throw some fruit trees there, a food plot, whatever. And I just stack the reasons for that deer to come past that location. And that property I was on in Ohio was a little over 400 acres. And we came up with 10 tree stand locations. And I'm telling you, any one of those 10 locations, you can easily get into and out of without busting deer on the property. And I feel very confident that a mature buck can be killed from any of those 10 locations. And I just think that most property owners don't understand how much benefit owning that property gives them over a permission property or public piece or whatever. And very few fully take advantage of the benefits that land ownership gives them.
When you first started taking Wes and I kind of under your wing to basically follow this methodology, I remember very specifically you telling us, quit worrying about what the deer are currently doing. Pick your stand locations, and we can manipulate what the deer are going to be doing in the future. So, that mindset, I think looking at deer sign, I like to go around and have the property owner tell me what's going on and looking, because it gives me a feel for how many deer we're talking about. That way our nutrition plan can be in par with what our deer density is. But, like you said, I don't care about every single rub and scrape on it, because we're not going and putting a stand on every single rub and scrape. We're manipulating that to pull it back. And that's probably, in all reality, the biggest thing that sets us apart from anybody else. I've seen these other plans. Actually, one of the visits I was on today was reworking a farm that was already consulted on. I know you've done quite a few of those. And you could tell that this plan that they showed it to me was simply going and finding sign and figuring out how to hunt sign. So, people always ask us what makes us different. I personally believe that's the biggest thing that, like you said, a landowner has to understand. He has that advantage that a lease or permission property or public land hunter doesn't have.
Mm-hmm. The property I was just talking about in Ohio, they actually had another consultant there, a big name consultant actually, and it doesn't matter who it was. But you're right. Our approach is totally different because we're changing what the deer are doing. We're not taking advantage. I mean, there's going to be situations where the deer are doing something where obviously we're going to capitalize on that because, maybe they're coming, an inside corner of a field, for example. The deer that's almost always going to be a good stand location. And so we're going to take advantage of something like that, obviously. But we're also always looking for opportunities to totally do things that, I threw out some ideas that this client was there with a good friend of his and both serious deer hunters. And I threw out some things I promise you they did not see coming. And they even said so. I would have never, ever thought to do that. And that's what we're trying to do is just get them to look at things from a totally different perspective. Hey, I own this property. I can do whatever I want to this property. I can cut every single tree down if I want. I can bring a dozer in. I can make a 20-acre food plot right here in the middle of this giant woods, or just on and on. The possibilities are endless, and you can't limit your thoughts to the way you've been doing things. You need to really open your mind, and everything is on the table. And the thing that I've noticed in recent years is that my clients have become way more open-minded about some really radical things that can be done, and it's to their benefit. Because like this property I'm just talking about, and it goes with about any property I do, I absolutely know without a doubt if you'll just follow the plan, you're going to be so shocked at your success in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
You're not even going to question anything from that point forward. But it's getting that buy-in, and that's my biggest challenge as a consultant is, one of my weaknesses, I think, is communication. I'm just kind of a quiet country boy that kind of assumes that the guy next to me is thinking and seeing the same thing that I am. And you and Steve Shields have told me many times that you need to open up a little bit, because what you got spinning through your mind, nobody else has even considered. And that doesn't make me smarter than them. It's just I'm looking at it from a different angle because I've done it so much. But that's my challenge sometimes, is getting buy-in from the client. Because if I can get him to buy in, I got to show some excitement or something to get him to buy in, because I know that if he buys in, I know he's going to be happy. And I know his success is going to go up. But that's probably my biggest weakness is verbal communication. I can take a keyboard and I can write a magazine article, and then I can proofread it 3 times and polish it up a little bit each time, and I can sound like a genius. But the spoken word sometimes is a challenge for me.
Well, when you look at the team of consultants that you've put together, I kind of laugh sometimes because you've identified where kind of our strengths and weaknesses are. And, a lot of the jobs that you kind of push my way is more hill country, Kentucky, Ohio, where we have a lot of topography where they're trying to set up a habitat program. That's kind of where you've kind of put me in a little bit more of that niche. Bobby's big woods hunting, finding those draws, but probably not the habitat side in big woods. And I was and Don, I'm not talking hill country, I'm talking mountains this week, and both in Kentucky and Ohio. And the fun part about these visits this week was the property owner had gone in and already cleared a lot of land. They identified some flat spots, which sometimes that's all you can do is, where can I clear the flat spot? But then going in, you're talking about this poor soil that's been in trees since creation, I guess. But, you got shale. Let's talk a little bit about these guys that are talking about clearing off a wooded area right now, and about soil health, because I've spent more time talking about that this week. And these guys that I was on their property said they never even thought about that. They think that they can just clear off the top of a hillside that's been in large trees with a dozer and backgrade it and start putting corn and soybeans in it. And that soil health needs to be built with either inputs or, a couple years of good rotations to get organic matter there. I think it's just a fascinating topic as guys are talking about clearing spots. I know there's a ton of people that have put their list of things they're going to do this winter, and that's clear out trees for a food plot. And we talk about soil charge and then a fall plot or a legume or something like that. Walk us through some ideas about when you have a client that's got mud there from a freshly cleared plot. How do we build that soil health? How do we get to the point that we can have really good food plots there when it's been trees since as far back as we know?
Well, a lot of times you clear that plot, and someone that's not experienced thinks that, I got a cleared plot, I'm ready to roll. Well, a lot of times it takes years to get that plot, up to par as far as the nutrition or the nutrient level in the soil. And, you got to start with a soil test. Where are you starting from? And that's your baseline that you build from. And then you do things, and every couple of years you take a soil test. But, almost always the pH is going to be low. You're almost always going to have to add lime, and a lot of lime, tons per acre. And so without a soil test, you have no idea, what your pH is going to be and how much lime you need to add. But if your pH is off, nothing else really matters. That's where it all starts. And then you mentioned organic matter and some other things. Without a soil test, you don't know. So it's all got to start with a soil test. But then, there's things that you can plant there, and the brassica type plants, the bulb plants, the radish and turnips and such. if you look at a radish, you got that big round bulb, but at the bottom of that bulb, you got this long hair root, that tap root, and that tap root may be going down a couple of feet, and it'll mine those nutrients, and it'll bring those nutrients up through that tap root up to the bulb and even the top of the plant. And it puts those nutrients up there on the surface or close to the surface where the next crop that you plant can utilize those nutrients that are already in your soil. So, something interesting is that I just learned this year is if you buy a new piece of property with some tillable acreage on it, you can have a nutrient analysis done of that soil, and you can write that off on your taxes, just as like if you can write a fence off or tile off or anything else. You can do a nutrient profile of your soil, and you can write the value of those nutrients off on your taxes. And I hired a place to do it on my new 98-acre piece. There's 72 or 3 tillable acres there. And on average, this company is telling me on average they can get you about $1,700 an acre write-off on your taxes. So, take $1,700 times 72 acres, and, you're talking over $100,000 that I can write off on my taxes this year. And so anyway, that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that nutrient profile can be done to tell you what you got in that new plot that you've just cleared. And it'll basically guide and direct you what you need to do to build up whatever is missing. A lot of times it's going to be, the soil pH, as I mentioned, but also organic matter. And there's just a lot of different plants that can be planted to build up various nutrients that are needed, but it all starts with a soil test. So you clear that plot, get a soil test.
Yep. All right, before the Osseo break, I got to put this picture up on the screen. Make sure you explain it for the people listening on the audio platforms of what you're looking at. You posted this on social media. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I seen that on a consulting job here in Southern Illinois about a week ago. But so it's a camper, a truck camper. You guys have seen those campers that slide into the bed of a pickup, and it goes over the cab. There's like a bed that goes over the cab. But anyway, someone has jacked one of these things up in the air and put it on legs, and they made a deer blind out of it. They've even built a porch off of the back of it. But it was unbelievable. I told
this
the
thing
client,
looks like it's 10. This looks like it's 8-10 feet in the air. I don't know how far it really is. But
it is. It absolutely is. You can see that ground blind under it, that little pop-up ground blind that somebody's put up there. I mean, this thing's been up in the air for years. I mean, it's all dilapidated now. It probably isn't even safe to climb into, but it's probably one of the more unique deer stands I've ever seen.
Redneck ingenuity at its finest. So,
yeah.
Unbelievable what we see out there sometimes. Well, let's take a quick break for our spot with Osseo. We want to thank them for being the feature sponsor of our podcast and the relationship we have with those guys. Make sure you check out the Mission Whitetail podcast with Joe Miles. You can find it on all the standard audio platforms. And we'll be right back with the Higgins Hot Seat segment brought to you by 360 Blinds. Be right back.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
We're back, Don, and we're going to do this new segment, Higgins Hot Seat, where you have promised to answer whatever question I throw at you this week, but I forgot to ask at the beginning of the show. You're at least feeling a little bit better this week. You're not coughing as bad. I have to admit, I was a little bit ornery last week during post-production because I took out some of the long coughing fits. So last week when you were sick, like you would start coughing and it would be a couple minutes before you could get it under control. So I took those out. But every once in a while, when you covered that mic and you coughed, we had a couple people say it sounded like a snort wheeze and a couple people say it sounded like a good toot after a Mexican dinner. So I was a little bit mischievous, and I left a couple of them in there just because I thought it sounded really funny when you covered up that mic. But I'm glad you feel better this week.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit better each day. It's gone around our area. I hope none of the listeners had to deal with it, but it hung on for about 10 days. And actually, I still got a little bit of a cough, but it's nothing like it was last week.
All right. Well, our friends at 360 helped us come up with this idea, and I want to explain why we're doing this. This Higgins Hot Seat idea, one of the things that we get feedback on from this podcast is how throughout anything we do, you are pretty much unfiltered and say it like it is, even if it's not the appropriate thing to say sometimes. But I think that's why people like listening to you, Don. It's you're just candid with your responses. I think we'll just leave it at that. So this segment every week, I've already started accumulating questions. These don't necessarily come from listeners. This is going to be just different things that I've observed that I just want a just brutally honest response from. Okay? So 360 is kind of sponsoring this segment, and so here it goes the first week, and I'm going to set this whole thing up with a little bit of a narrative. I was down about 2.5 hours away in Kentucky on a land consulting job today. Today is Saturday, January 4th. And across central Kentucky tomorrow is Snowmageddon is coming in. Yeah. Weather forecasts are 8 to 10 inches. We got ice predicted. And Patrick Simpson rode along with me today. And we were driving along the last hour and a half of daylight. And you would not believe the deer that we saw in every field out eating. And I got to thinking about how you made a Facebook post this week, and I think you actually called it BS, where there has been reports of a study that's been done that says the front side of a weather front has no bearing on deer movement and activity. And I don't think everybody who listens to this podcast, number one, has access to some of this data or some of these claims of this so-called study, nor did they see your response of someone saying that deer do not react on the front side of a weather front. So somebody's saying that they tested collared research, and when a front came through on the front side of it, the deer didn't change their behavior. So go into, I want brutally honest, is it true or is it false?
Well, by my observations, it's total nonsense. I think that there are people and groups out there that they are more into harvesting social media likes and followers than they are harvesting deer, and especially big mature bucks. And you know what? It gets me that some of the people that have a rather large social media following put out some of the most ridiculous garbage possible. And the idea, I've been saying forever that weather trumps everything. We talk about the moon, weather trumps the moon. Talk about the rut, weather trumps the rut. And I might get a little pushback on that, but I'm going to tell you what, if we're in the peak of the rut and the temperature is 20 degrees warmer than normal, it's going to suppress rut activity, especially daylight rut activity. Weather trumps absolutely everything. And, yesterday, we've got that same weather front hitting, and I'm a little bit farther west than you are, so I'm a little bit ahead of that. But the last two evenings, the deer activity has just been absolutely unbelievable. I mean, herds of deer out feeding in fields everywhere. And it's ahead of this front that's coming. And I know barometric pressure ties into it and the temperature drop and everything else. But there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that deer move ahead of a cold weather front. I see it time after time after time. And, I don't know anything about the study. When I see something that's nonsense, I've got no reason to dig into it deep and listen to details. It's just a waste of my time because they're going to try to prove something to me that I already know is false. In this situation, it's the idea that deer don't move ahead of a cold weather front. I know that they do. So why would I want to spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes of my time listening to the nonsense? It's, I mean, I don't know what the idea was. I don't know where the study happened. I don't know details of the study or what they're trying to prove. I think most of it is they're trying to get hits off of social media, likes, follows, whatever. And what really blows my mind is that deer hunters know better than that. I mean, if you look at the post I made, did anybody disagree? I asked people what they thought. I didn't see a single person. I haven't looked at that post for a while, but I didn't see a single person that disagreed with me. Every deer hunter agreed with me. So why do those people that agree with me, why would they ever want to follow an organization or a person putting out bad information? I mean, that's just a reason for me to pull the plug. If they can't be trusted with something so obvious as this topic, why would I trust them on other more controversial? I mean, this is not even. I mean, it's controversial, but it's not even like 50% think one way and 50% think another. This is like 98% of deer hunters are going to know this is garbage. So why follow some group or person putting out garbage?
So I'm going to answer your question. You said you don't know why. There is actually, and to be honest with you, I'm concerned about it. I think it's going to eventually have a very, very negative effect on social media, YouTube, all of the different platforms out there. But there's a new technique that folks are using AI to generate narrative. So they will, let's say an example, we find a video of somebody pouring concrete. Okay. And we take that video of somebody pouring concrete that they didn't put any rebar in it. The concrete is poured about as loose as water. There's no forms, and they don't finish it. Okay, so every fundamental part of pouring concrete is wrong. And then there's this robotic voice or AI voice that goes over the top of this video playing on all social media platforms saying, this is the best way to pour concrete. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. Basically making false comments. And the sole purpose of it is our society has gotten so ingrained into arguing that they take the bait. We're so quick to jump on social media and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And just on the comments below. And all of a sudden that exponentially takes the comments and the views, and it triggers the analytics on the social media platform. So it's a very, very, it's getting very popular as a technique. It wouldn't surprise me if the Russians and the Chinese aren't behind it, because that's where all the money's going to go back to anyway. But, these bots, if you will, using AI to search for this content and then put it out there, knowing that it's bad information, just to create our society, whether we think that we're all Simon Cowell on American Idol, just trying to be judges and mean and, hateful to each other. our society is being sucked into basically just finding something to argue about and making comments on it. And somebody is then sitting back going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching with all of these comments and likes, or not likes, but any engagement's good engagement on social media, even if people are complaining or arguing, right?
Well, it doesn't even have to be AI, artificial intelligence. We've got people out there who will flat out lie about other people just to stir up controversy and get other people to not like them and comment, about them. I see it about myself. There's more than one person who's made false claims, actually blatant lies about me, and then they get all these comments and such. People jumping on board, and negativity sells and attracts people more than positivity. Yep. You can make a positive comment about something, and it's not going to get near the attraction or traction of something negative that you post. And the sad thing is that you can tarnish a person's reputation with something that's absolutely, totally, 100% false,
just to get views.
Just to get views.
Let's talk about positives, and I'm going to share screen right here. Let's talk about where we're going to be in person over the next probably 9 to 10 weeks, doing either live podcasts or seminars, and you can get through this really quick. We shared it a couple weeks ago, but I would call this a positive because we get to meet all these people that want to come down and say hi to us.
Yep. January 24th, I'm going to be in Mount Hope, Ohio. JB's Feed is putting on an event there, be a supper and such. If you're interested in coming to that one, phone number is 330-893-3684. I'm going to do a presentation that night that I have never done before.
We're doing live podcasts too.
Are we doing that?
I think we're doing live. I think we're doing both. I think it's like a 2-hour show. You're doing a seminar and we're doing a live podcast.
Well, I promise you my seminar is going to be something different than you. I don't care if you've been to every seminar I've ever done. You're going to hear something different at this one. February 13th to the 15th, the Midwest Sportsman Classic in Shipshewana, Indiana. We'll be there all 3 days. We're going to do a live podcast. We got the legends coming in for different seminars. I think Al Foster and I will be doing one together. If you got any questions about that, number is 574-248-0322. They're expecting a huge crowd. I'm not even sure if booths are still available for vendors. If you have to call that number to find out. February 27th, Primeland Outdoors in Macon, Missouri. I'm going to be doing a seminar there. You want to call 660-973-2697. March 1st, I'll be in Oswego, Kansas for the Kansas Whitetail Summit. Going to be some other speakers there that day. Great catered lunch. Be a great time. It's going to be all educational. Some pretty good speakers lined up besides myself. Not that I'm a very good speaker, but the other guys will be fantastic. So the number there is 785-949-2204. The next weekend will be at the Iowa Deer Classic. You and I are going to do a live podcast Friday night. I'm going to do a seminar Saturday and Sunday. This is going to be this and the weekend before at the Kansas Whitetail Summit. This is a presentation I've been working on for weeks. Brand new one as well, something I haven't shared before. Don't want to miss that one. And March 15th, next weekend, I'll be in Denver, Indiana at Split Brow Outdoors, Real World Dealer. I'm doing a seminar there. 765-469-3621.
Coming this February to the Michiana Event Center in Shipshewana, Indiana, the FAE Midwest Sportsman Classic. Thursday, February 13th through Saturday, February 15th. Come see the Whitetail Legends Classic with
Bobby Worthington, Don Higgins, Al Foster, Joe Miles, Gene Winsell, Barry Winsell, and moderator Terry Peer.
We started shooting arrows. Here we are pushing 80 years old and we haven't put our toys away yet.
To say, like, these lights really brighten my eyes, and I know what the buck felt like that Don Higgins got last year right before he pulled the trigger.
When I got to hunting the whitetail deer later on, I realized I was hunting the #1 prey animal in the world, the most difficult animal in the world to kill. Before that week was over, my heart was broken because I found out they had a naked man in their room. True story.
Whitetail bucks aren't supposed to be easy. A mature whitetail buck, he's the top of the line. I mean, he's the top challenge in the archery world, and it's supposed to be a close range sport.
You know, I think that there's too many deer hunters out there that are trying to improve their success through their equipment instead of their woodsmanship skills.
Don't miss the Chasing Giants live podcast on Thursday night. Brian Dickinson, the author of Blind Descent, on stage Friday and Saturday. Mark Zona, the Hall of Fame angler, will be live on Thursday and Friday to show you how legends catch big fish. Also in this year's Unmatched speaker lineup, Terry Hodges, the legendary game warden and author of the thrilling Warden Force series. Team Radical on big game hunting and predator calling. Andy Andreas on fruit trees for wildlife. Smokey from Smokey's Deer Lures. And James Watson, Ross Robertson, and Mike Raber rounding out our next level fishing lineup. Thousands of dollars in attendee giveaways, guns, a double drop hunting blind, a fishing trip, Osseo camo, kayak, and more. Find a full show schedule at MidwestSportsmanClassic.com. Tickets available at the door. February 13th, 14th, and 15th. For more information, go to MidwestSportsmanClassic.com.
Before we transition to the listener-submitted questions brought to us by Midwest Land Group, Don, we kind of have two little prayer requests. I think it would be, if it's all right with our listeners, I think this is important to both of us. Let's just take a quick break and give an update about two situations that we learned of this week, and hopefully those who listen to the podcast that are believers can remember these folks in your prayers.
Yeah, the first one is I heard from Derek at Tag Out. Tag Out is a real world distributor in northern Indiana. Derek is also the one who puts on the Ships You Want to Show, the Midwest Sportsman Classic. But there's a gentleman that's been working with Tag Out for a number of years. His name is Kenny. You guys may have dealt with Kenny if you've ordered anything from Tag Out. I know they carry a lot of products besides real world products. Or if you come to the Ships You Want to Show or been there in the past, Kenny's a little redheaded guy that you might see running around the show. Just a super good guy.
Super great guy.
I always look forward to seeing him.
Yep.
Whether I'm at a show or I stop by the Tag Out facility when I'm in the area. But this week, Kenny was diagnosed with lung cancer, and we'd like to ask for all of the listeners of Chasing Giants to remember him in your prayers. Hopefully Kenny can beat this, and we're all going to lift him up in prayers and ask God to intervene and heal Kenny.
Yep.
The other one is what's the gentleman's first name? Clark is his last name.
Nick Clark.
Nick Clark was involved in an accident at his work. I think he's a lineman and was electrocuted on the job and in very serious condition. Just ask that our listeners pray for Nick and for his family, that he can be healed of whatever injuries that he is had from that electrocution, but also for his family, that they would have peace and comfort and strength to get through that situation, and as they stand there with Nick and help him with his battle.
Yeah. Lester's Feet is actually reaching out to see what we can do to facilitate it. I know, a lineman kind of hits home for you a little bit because your son-in-law is a lineman, and especially as the storms rolling through the Midwest and all this ice, prayers for safety of these guys out risking getting power back restored. It's a very, very dangerous job that I don't think gets appreciated very much. But, those two are, we don't typically just take open prayer requests. Maybe we should. I don't know. But those two guys, we learned about their situations this week, and both of them very loyal and faithful listeners to the podcast and supporters of ours. But we just wanted to take a time to do that. So without further ado, let's switch over to the the Midwest Land Group listener submitted questions, and I'll put the first one up on the screen for you.
Yeah, the first one comes from Anonymous. It says, "Thank you for the podcast and for unabashedly sharing the gospel of Christ. I hope the new year is a prosperous one for your endeavors. I planted for the first time a small plot of NutriCrave corn. It came up great. I was getting excited when it got up to chest high, but then a storm came and laid probably 90% of it on the ground. My excitement was deflated, but a couple weeks later I realized that it was nearly all standing back up again, and then continued to put on ears and fell out nicely till the stand began to dry down. One day my cell cam informed me that a neighbor's cow was in the area. I raced over to the property on my ATV and ran not only that cow out, but 4 more cows out of the food plot and back to their pasture, which is nearly a mile away. For 6 days straight, there might have been one day in there that didn't have any cows, but 6 days saw cows in the plot needing to be chased out. One day the intruder count was up to 12. They effectively destroyed the corn plot, absolutely gone. Here's the question: could the cows smell the rich quality food from that distance? I'd like to try again in the spring, but if it was their noses that brought them to it, then I'll need to fence it off, but don't really want that expense. Another question: you talk highly of switchgrass fields for bedding. Some other big-name hunting gurus don't have any interest in it at all. Can you explain why you have had so much success with it, but others have not? I know that you said it's not for everyone, partly due to one's inability for cyclical burning. Well, in regards to the cows smelling the NutriCrave, I absolutely believe they can smell it. We see it with whitetails where we have a great food source in the wintertime, and all of a sudden these new deer, new bucks are showing up from who knows where. Seen it on my property a lot in past years, and I wouldn't be surprised if this week, with the weather we're going to have, if I don't have new bucks show up that I haven't seen at all in the past. So I do believe it's their noses that helps them find food. I mean, think about it. God sets these creatures up for survival, and food is a critical part of survival. He's going to help them find that food, and their noses is how they do it. So, I mean, absolutely, I think that's how they found the corn. I think they'll do it again next year. Instead of going to the expense of building a fence around your plot, I'd be visiting the farmer and having him build a fence around his pasture. That's where the problem lies. That's just me, though, so I won't get on that soapbox.
A 300 Win Mag bullet is a whole lot cheaper than a fence.
Well, I can tell you beef tastes a whole lot better than venison, in my opinion, so I'd much rather have ribeyes than I would venison, but that's just me.
We don't know what state this gentleman is because, well, we do, but he doesn't want it known. But I will tell you, in the state of Kentucky, if you reach out to an attorney and find out, in the state of Kentucky, there is actually a law called cattle at large, where the landowner is responsible for any damages of his livestock if it gets off of his property. And if you remember the podcast about a year or two ago, I had the same exact problem, and this was the only leverage that I had. Just know that some states may require you to share in the cost of a line fence on the property, if that's the case, if it's a property line fence. But you have legal, most likely you have more legal leverage than you think you do, but you just might have to get an attorney involved.
And I'm not going to encourage anyone to shoot someone's livestock over an instant. I've got livestock. I don't care how good of fences you got with livestock. At some point, they're going to get out. You're going to leave a gate open, or something's going to happen. A tree's going to fall across the fence. Something's going to happen. You're going to have livestock get out. And it's all part of being a good neighbor. But when it happens time after time after time, then, you got to do what you got to do. But
And once they know that food's there, you're not going to stop it until a good fence gets put up. They will come right back.
I go back to, I don't think it's your place to be building a fence around your plot. I think it's the cattle owner's job to be building a fence around his pasture, but just me.
What about switchgrass?
Switchgrass, why have I had success and others haven't? Well, I think there's two big reasons for that. Number one is the variety of switchgrass. There's a lot of different varieties, and some of it is absolutely way better than others. The real world switchgrass is the one that I've found that stands the best. It gets the tallest and stands the best. And I know there's some new special cultivars out there that are supposed to be the latest and the greatest, but I've not seen that firsthand. Maybe it is better. I don't know, but I know what I've seen firsthand, and that's real world's the best variety that I've seen. And I think that's a part of it. It stands throughout winter. You get these brutal winter conditions where it's wind and ice and snow and such. It'll blow a lot of these grasses down. If it happens to blow the real world switchgrass down, ice or something knocks it down. When that ice and stuff melts, it springs right back up. I've seen it many times where it's laid flat to the ground because of wet snow or ice, and once that melts, it springs right back up. You can't even tell it ever happened. And so I think the variety of switchgrass is part of it. But I also think the type of terrain or the cover that's available in an area is part of it as well. So if you're in an area where there's all kinds of cover for the deer, they got plenty of places to bed and to hide. I don't think switchgrass is going to be near as attractive to them as it is in an area like mine, where I'm out in this wide open ag prairie, and cover is really the key to success. And when you can create cover, whether it be wooded cover or tall grass, the deer are going to utilize it, and they're going to utilize it a whole lot heavier than if there's cover everywhere. So I think it's two things. It's the variety of the switchgrass, and I think it's the region or the area where it's at. And if cover is lacking, and you provide switchgrass, they're going to use it.
Ever had a terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
Next question comes from Ken Sparks from Ottawa, Illinois. Says, my number one life lesson from your podcast: attending church regularly does lead to killing bigger bucks on a more consistent basis. Well, I'm not sure that's the case, Ken, but brilliant observation. It took me 60 years to figure this out, he says. Listening to you and Terry are the reason for that. I commend you for that. My question to you is about culling bucks. My mindset in the past has been to not shoot any buck other than so-called target bucks. My thought pattern was the more bucks available, the more chance a neighbor would shoot one of them instead of my target buck. In a more pressured area, do you think this makes any sense? Every situation's a little bit different. I know that was the approach that I took for a number of years, was to try to save every buck and get them all to maturity, and then I'd pick out and shoot the biggest ones, and hopefully the neighbors would shoot the others. The seminar that I keep talking about that I'm going to be doing at the Iowa Deer Classic and at the Kansas Whitetail Summit. I'm going to really dig into this topic, the topic of managing your buck herd, culling bucks even. And can we change the genetics of a herd through culling? And I'm going to ruffle some feathers with this presentation, but I promise you everybody's going to leave with something to think about. And they're going to look at things from a little different perspective once they hear this seminar. I don't think that that you can manage the buck herd equally on every property. Some properties are going to lend itself to being able to manage the buck herd way better than other properties. And I'm going to admit that my property has allowed me to manage the buck herd in such a way that probably 98% of deer hunting properties in the United States are not going to be able to do what I've done to the degree that I've done it. Now, they're going to be able to do it to some degree, but not to the degree that I've been able to do it. So what I have to answer your question, I don't know, because I don't know your property. I don't know what kind of effect you're going to have by trying to manage your buck herd. That's one of the things that I throw out to my consulting clients is one of my suggestions is often, hey, when it comes to managing your deer herd, you need to do this or that. It's just hard to say without seeing your property and actually even being on your property. So it's a question I can't answer, but I can tell you at one time I was following that very approach that you talked about, and it did not work for me at all. All right. Next one comes from Mario Casasola. I hope I said that right, Mario, from Bologna, Arkansas. Says, Don and Terry, Happy New Year. Hoping that 2025 brings you continued success, health, wealth, and happiness. My question is about setting up stand sites. I recently gained access to a property that had existing stands situated. It didn't take long to notice that every older doe that came by these locations immediately looked up in the stand or circled downwind of the stands to see if there was anyone in it. The stands are in pretty good locations, travel corridor, transition area on the property, and deer are seen and photographed there on a regular basis. One stand site is in the interior of the property, which I know leads to issues. However, do you feel like it would be best to move the stands to a little different location within the same site that is a little more hidden and out of sight, or abandon the stand site altogether and start anew? I would also like you to share your thoughts about the effectiveness of ladder stands versus lock-on stands versus climbing stands versus blinds in situations like this. Most of these happen to be ladder stand, which makes it really simple to just climb into without much commotion or disturbance while climbing into the tree. I can be pretty quiet with a climber, but as we all know, there will still be some noise made while climbing. Just for reference, these locations also had a corn feeder there in the past, which may also explain to the nervous approach by the local deer herd. The gentleman set up 2 to 3 stands per location to account for various wind directions. The more I type, the sillier this seems, but I thought I would tee this up and get your expert perspective on situations like that you may have experienced or guided clients through in the past. If nothing else, this may help those still playing drinking games on New Year's Eve to get further along to their goals. LOL. Thanks in advance, and I enjoy listening to you guys. You give me lots to think about, but trying to keep it real and not overcomplicate it. Well, Mario, that was a long question, and you pushed your limits on getting your question selected because it was so long. Folks, if you want your question selected, make it brief.
Yeah, I almost didn't fit it on the screen.
Yeah, so just a little hint there. You want your question selected, don't write a novel. Deer, there's no doubt that deer get on to stands and stand locations, and a lot of times it's because of the stand is in the wrong location, that they catch the hunter coming in or going out, and that puts pressure on that exact location. But also, wind direction, person sitting in the stand and there's no good wind. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody tell me, well, I put my stand here because the deer can come from every direction. Because a lot of times when I'm walking a property with a client and I see a stand in a bad location, I know there's no possible wind direction that's going to work where that stand is located. I'll ask the client, what wind direction do you hunt this stand with? And some of the answers I've got, basically, they all tell me that they aren't playing the wind. They're not paying any attention to the wind whatsoever. And that's the point I'm trying to make is, hey, we need to change some things. And one of the things we need to change is we've got to start playing the wind when we hunt our stands every time out. And not just play the wind sometimes. Every time you go hunting, you got to play the wind, and you got to be sitting in a stand where the odds of a deer getting downwind of you are very low. Whether a deer can detect various types of stands over others, I don't know. I do think that ladder stands, I've seen situations where a guy puts up a new ladder stand and puts a trail camera on it, and the deer walk up and they're looking right at that ladder stand and even looking up. I forget, somebody sent me that picture a couple of years back, but I think deer can become used to anything. I mean, you can park an old piece of farm equipment, an old combine or tractor or whatever, out in a field, and the deer become used to it and will feed right next to it. If it's new, that's a totally different story. I've got 360 blinds. I got 7 of them on my property, and I'm very careful about how I hunt them. I'm always watching the wind. I don't depend on that blind to contain my scent, although I think they'll do a very good job of that for the most part. I'm still playing the wind as if I was sitting out in an open stand, but I don't overhunt them either. Each one gets limited hunting. I think of the 360 blinds on my farm, I don't think any of them has been hunted over about 4 or 5 times this whole season, and some of them maybe only once or twice. So it's not like I'm going out there 3 times a week hunting out of the same blind time after time. I feel very confident that I could kill a mature buck out of any of those 360 blinds on my place. But I think you got to mix it up at times too. You mentioned that the guy's got 3 stands around the same location to play different winds. Well, I'm here to tell you that makes no sense to me, because any stand site is only going to be good for maybe a couple of different winds. I mean, you may be able to hunt any westerly wind, straight west, northwest, southwest, but I don't see how, for the most part, you're going to come in and also have a stand there to hunt east winds. That situation is just so rare that I don't see how this guy's doing it multiple times on the same property. So I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but deer can absolutely get on to your stand locations, and if they do, it's time to move.
That statement about the wind and hunting 3 different wind directions, that might be the case for someone who's only thinking about where their wind's blowing, but not into giving the deer the wind that they want. That's just as important as where our wind is coming from access, but we don't understand exactly the details of it. Let's try to get one more question done before we're running a little bit late today, but let's try to get one more done before we end.
Yeah, the last one comes from Colin Price from Minot, Illinois. Hope I said that town right. I'd never heard of it before. But anyway, he says, on the last podcast, you discussed your food plot plan for next year, incorporating green cover crop into your grains to increase tonnage and maximize your food plots. I own a property that's 160 acres and about 50% ag and 50% timber. The farmer that farms the ground leaves 1 to 2 acres of standing beans and corn in a few different locations that we had asked him to for the deer. If we cannot plant food plots per the landowner's request, but he would let us incorporate greens into the standing grains left by the farmer. How would we go about doing this without disturbing the farmer's process? Well, Colin, there's a lot of farmers today that are utilizing cover crops. Cover crops, build the soil, have a lot of benefits. They also can hold back weed pressure. I would talk to your farmer about doing a cover crop on at least part of his acreage. And the way to seed that is with a drone. There's some guys that have drones for aerial seeding. I got one in my area. I'm actually going to be producing a video about that at some point in the near future. But, if you're willing to buy the seed, you're willing to pay the guy with the drone to fly it on, the farmer would be very likely to allow you to do such because he's going to gain the benefits, for his next crop. So that's how I would approach that. Even if I think that's even a better idea than leaving the standing grain. Now, although the standing grain is great also, the thing of it is he's only going to leave you an acre or two where you can go in and aerial seed 10, 20, 40 acres of cover crop. And probably the more you're willing to do, the more he's going to like it. So that's how you end up with a giant cover crop or food plot that has real drawing power. You're not just looking at a couple acres. You got 10, 20 acres out there. You got some drawing power.
All right. Great comment. Get on the same page with that farmer. Understand residual herbicides he might be using, his chemical plan, and my guess is he would be all for cover crop.
Yep.
All right. We're going to close the show out here, but I think that being our first episode of 2025, you have this year looking ahead, hunting or non-hunting. Do you have any goals or aspirations that you think you might want to basically accomplish this year? Have you been thinking about that any or not?
Well, yeah, a little bit. I got
We're
some.
not we've talked about it. We're not into New Year's resolutions, but we're starting a new year. We both have business opportunities that we are trying to drive over the finish line. What's out there that you want to do this year?
Well, from a deer hunting perspective, I was counting up the other day that I know of at least 5 or 6 different bucks that have a potential to be really special next year on basically 4 different properties. So I got high hopes of shooting a giant next fall. Now, whether any of those will make 200 inches, who knows? But I think any one of them could definitely be over 180. I think that, business-wise, I've got some things in the works that I'm not probably ready to share yet. Trying to accomplish some things there. I was thinking about this the other day. I just want to be a better person. I have a tendency to let the negative get me down. I can have one person on social media make a negative comment, especially if it's a lie about me, and I let that get me fired up when I could. The same post might have 100 positive comments, and I tend to focus on that one negative rather than the 100 positive, and that's a mindset that I'm working to change. I just need to get better at shutting out the haters, even if they're spreading blatant lies, because the one thing that I've noticed, Terry, and this is unbelievable. I think in the last year I've come under attack more than I ever have in my life by things that are blatantly not even true. And yet at the same time in the last year, my blessings have been greater than ever and in many different ways. Business wise, the phone for consulting visits has just exploded. even though I've got a number of guys that are trying to be consultants themselves bashing me, saying things that aren't true, and yet it doesn't seem to affect the phone. It just keeps ringing. So I think that I know God knows my heart, and He knows I want to be fair to everyone. And He knows I try to do things right by everyone that I deal with. And I think He honors that. I've seen it. I just need to turn off that 1% negative and focus on the 99% positive. And I have not always done a good job at that. So my biggest goal for 2025 is to get better at just ignoring the garbage and focusing on the positive. And I'm telling you guys, if you're in Ohio or even close, that seminar that I'm going to do at JB's Feed at Mount Hope on January 24th is going to be something to come listen to. I'm going to share some things I haven't talked about before in that seminar, and it's all geared towards this whole idea of being more positive and less negative in everything I do. So that's kind of my goal, is to be more positive.
All right.
How about you, Terry? You got to have one.
I have a complete farm remodel. The tenant farmer is no longer on the farm that his contract ended with the family. So I'm going to be farming the entire farm this year, but Austin, Razor, and I are going to fly in and completely rework. And that's moving bedding around. I'm going to put a diversion fence in and have that project done for goal number 2. And that is start an annual tradition of turkey hunting on the property with Al, Joe, and you. Hopefully you're going to come back this year, but my goal is to get Dwayne Hopkins involved and get him his first turkey. So I found out this winter that he has not shot a turkey yet. So I think I really enjoyed it last year about having everybody in, and so I think that we can make that an annual event for everybody. Goodness knows I have enough turkeys to go around for everybody, so that shouldn't be a problem. And then I'm going to take whatever this season brings me. I've put pressure on myself to, accomplish a goal, and that I was able to get it last year with the buckeye shot. It took me 3 years to do it. Sometimes it's just not realistic. But I'm going to set a goal based on what we have, and it might not be to shoot a deer in 2025 if I don't have a deer that's up to the standard that I want. So I can't make that prediction yet, but yeah, we have gotten to the point, you and I, it's hunting a specific buck that we choose to target and try to close the deal on. And if I can't find one that meets those standards, then I'll have a fun time filming or getting footage this coming year. But we obviously want to grow Lester's Feet. We want to grow our businesses to glorify. The more we grow our businesses, I think the more outreach and ministry that we can do through those businesses. So we don't want to obviously grow them for selfish ambition. But if we can do that to serve the kingdom, I think that's honoring what God's blessed us with.
Well, I'll tell you, the more you get in line with God's word and the more sincere your heart is, the more you're blessed. And there's certain scripture that it doesn't mean a whole lot until you've lived it. And there's certain situations I probably shouldn't even comment on where I know I did the right thing, even though the other person thought I was doing the wrong thing. And God knew my heart through that situation. And it's been multiple situations, actually, not just one. When your heart is pure, God honors that. And it's crazy that you can see yourself being bashed with blatant lies on a daily basis, and you're sitting there worried what effect this is going to have on your business. And it has just the opposite effect of what you think. You think these people are going to destroy my reputation and my business. And yet God seems to know that that's a lie. He does know it's a lie. And you become blessed. It goes the opposite direction. Instead of losing business, your business grows. It's just unexplainable until you've lived it.
All right, well, stick around. We're going to close out the show here, and Brent Henderson, our friend from Indiana, has this week's Sunday Night Prayer Time, so I hope you'll stick around and listen to that. Brent's always so good at speaking. He does a really good job. If your church is interested in having a wild game dinner or men's ministry event, please reach out and get a hold of him. He's really, really good. Great to call him a friend, and thankful that he contributes to us every now and then on our schedule. So see you next week.
God bless everyone. Hope you have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey guys, welcome back to Chasing Giants Sunday Night Prayer Time. It's always great to be back with y'all. We just went through New Year's in, wow, what a year. What a year 2024, has been. And, if we look back at the past year and everything that happened, we kind of look at the next year and we can be feeling anxiety, we can be feeling worry, we can be feeling doubt, we can be feeling anger. There's all kinds of stuff that 2024 produced, within us. And I kind of want to take today to kind of walk through maybe how we can make 2025, a really, really good year, no matter what happens. I was looking at the forecast coming up. We have a big snowstorm. By the time you see this, it'll be hitting the Midwest over this weekend, and it's going to be a pretty big snowfall. I live here in Indiana, and they don't really know how to handle snow. I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania, and we would get that lake effect snow, and it didn't matter if we had a foot of snow. You were walking to school. Didn't have a backpack back then. I was carrying all my books and walking through slush, and we had on those rubber galoshes. You had to kind of put them on, and if it was cold out or whatever, and you didn't want your feet to get wet, your mom would put like a Wonder Bread wrapper. You remember that? Over your foot to keep the moisture from getting in. And times have changed, and I am so glad for that. But if you can remember, back to 1978, we had the blizzard of 78, and that was a big snowstorm. I think it was one that if you live through it, you will never forget it. And it was during that deer season. I was 18 years of age. It was early December. And my dad had taken me, hunting. We drove to a spot. It was tough to get there. What normally would be about a maybe 30, 40-minute drive took us like an hour and a half. But when we got to the location, we were able to kind of get down this logging road a little ways. And then that was it. I mean, there was nothing was plowed. It was terrible. And he said, we're not going to be able to get into the woods very far because it was waist deep. So we maybe got into the woods 60, 70, 80 yards and just kind of took our spot, in the dark, waiting for it to get light. And there was hardly anybody out because it was terrible. The storm had really wreaked havoc. It was cold. You knew you weren't going to be out very long. And you were probably, if you were like me, wearing those big felt pack boots that weighed like 20 pounds each. They were crazy. So we get in the woods. It's getting light, and up toward that, kind of like that logging road where we had come in, I hear a gunshot. Well, of course, I've got my .6 now. I'm paying attention, I'm looking, and it was real easy to see. The leaves are all gone. The snow is so deep, anything moving, you're going to see it. And I see this buck, well, at least I think it is, come running down through this waist-deep snow, but it's not really running. It's kind of just doing that, trying to get up in the air and back down again because it was so deep it was hitting its belly. And my dad looks, he goes, "Brent, don't shoot, it's a doe." No, this is buck season in Pennsylvania back then. You didn't have a doe tag, you took a buck. There weren't any antler restrictions yet. I think it really, if it was a spike, if it was under 3 inches or whatever, it could be considered a doe. But I see this thing coming, and I raise my rifle, and I'm waiting for this thing to slow down, and I take the shot, just pancake it right into the snow. The thing just tips over immediately. And my dad, he's freaking out. He's like, Brent, he says, that was a doe. What are we going to do? I said, Dad, I know I saw horns. He says, Brent, I'm pretty sure it was a doe. So we go over to this thing, and the way this thing fell in the snow, its head was kind of like down into this really deep snowdrift. And I reached down, and I'm not seeing horns at first. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And I reached down and I pulled the head up. And when I pulled the head up, it was a half rack, and there was 4 on one side. And I knew I had seen, this was a buck. But it was in that moment, that fear. What if it wasn't good enough? What if this thing wasn't big enough? What if I had messed up? Am I going to have less value now? And as I was thinking, we have this snowstorm coming in here this weekend, and it took me back to another story, another snowstorm, probably about 10 years ago. Hit central Indiana, and I get this phone call. And this guy, I knew him. I hadn't seen him in a long time, probably 20 years. And he said, hey, would you have a chance to be able to sit down with me? And he knew I did a lot of coaching. And I said, yeah, I mean, what do you think? And he says, well, I don't want to do it over the phone. I want to come and sit down across from you. I said, okay. So I met him out at Cracker Barrel about 4 miles away. It was terribly snowy that day. He gets there, we go in, we sit down, and he begins to share with me, about, he had been a pastor for many, many years, and that he had left ministry about 5 years prior. And I said, oh, I never knew you left ministry. He says, yeah. He said, I had an affair. He said, my wife and I were able to keep our marriage together. We worked hard on it. And he said, but that happened about 5 years ago. And he says, I've never been the same. My wife, those that knew us, they treat us differently. And I just said, man, I am so sorry, that you bought into those lies of the enemy, that telling you to go somewhere else, that maybe it would be the grass is greener on the other side. I said, so tell me what you want to talk about. Let's go through this a little bit. And he says, I'm feeling like God is calling me to go back into ministry again. He says, but I know I can't. I said, tell me why you say you can't. He says, well, the average time away after someone's had an affair like that who's in ministry is usually like 10 to 15 years before they can go back in some way, shape, or form. And I said, I don't really care what statistics say. What I really care about is, first of all, are you healthy? And what does God say about this? And he just kind of looked at me, and so I took this placemat kind of thing, and I flipped it over, and I think I actually asked the waitress for a pen. And I said, I want to walk through this with you, because for some reason you feel like your sin has disqualified you from being in ministry. And he says, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. So I sat down and I said, let me do something here. I said, first of all, what I want you to do is I want you to identify the unhealthy emotions, that you've been feeling, and obviously you still are. We wouldn't be sitting here right now. He said, yeah. He said, that's easy, shame and condemnation. And I said, well, all right. So I wrote those down, shame and condemnation. That's the unhealthy emotion. How do we know if an emotion is unhealthy or not? Well, here's how you know. If that emotion that you have lines up with the deeds of the flesh, things like lust, anger, rage, jealousy, you can be pretty sure there's a lie twisted in with what you're thinking. But if that emotion lines up with the fruit of the Spirit, love, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, self-control, then you can be pretty sure that the way you're thinking is lining up with God's thoughts. So I said, all right, so your unhealthy thoughts are, and I wrote them down. I said, now look at these. And he said, shame and condemnation. I said, now, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to identify the unhealthy thoughts you're thinking that are causing you to feel that way. And he said, yeah, that's pretty easy too. He said, what's everybody thinking about me that knew about my affair? I said, all right. So I wrote that down. I said, now what I want you to do is I want you to write down for number 3, I want you to write down and identify the truth about what God says. He said, what are you talking about? I says, what does God say? What does God say about this situation? What does he say about you? He says, Brent, I had an affair. I said, what does God say about you? And he just sat there. And I said, if we go back to Psalm 103, God says, that he's cast my sins as far as the east is from the west. You go to Hebrews, it says he remembers it no more. He knew these verses, but he wasn't really doing anything to change the way he was thinking. You go to Romans 12:2, and that we are transformed by the renewing of our mind. We can't transform ourselves. But through God's word, when we renew our mind with what God's truths are, we're transformed. See, if you're a believer, you were transfigured the moment you truly believed. Your spirit, God's promised Holy Spirit, came into your spirit. It gave you his identity, his good enough. What is it? Romans 3:22, this righteousness from God comes through faith in Christ Jesus to all who believe. We go back and we can see where our righteousness, is as filthy rags. So many of us, we do the same thing like this pastor. We look at our mistakes, right? And we somehow didn't perform good enough in a certain situation. And all of a sudden others begin to gossip, or they speak to us in a crude way, and so we begin to feel less than. And I've talked about this before on here. I talk about the big lie, and the big lie says this, that my performance plus others' opinions equals my self-worth. And that is a lie from the pit of hell. So for this new year, what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of give you an example, because I think all of us can relate to this, because this year I really want to see you be as effective for reaching men and families for the kingdom as you ever have in your entire life. And it doesn't matter what your sin is. It matters that you're getting healthy. It matters that you're learning to trust God, because does God want us to do good things? Sure he does. Absolutely. But you can't do that unless you trust him. Because if you do anything outside of trusting in him and you're doing it on your own, you're trying to get your own form of righteousness, through doing good works. You go back to Luke chapter 6, I think it's verses 43 to 45, where it talks about the healthy tree and the unhealthy tree. One bears fruit, one doesn't. Why? Because you have to go back to the root system. Where are your roots planted? I think it's in the Eugene Peterson Message translation, where it says that it's who you are, not what you say and do that counts. It says your true being, who you really are, brims over into true words and deeds. So it's really important that you understand righteousness coming into this new year. It's important that you understand your one true identity comes from Christ being in you, not from your performance, not what other people think about you. And as I was sharing with this guy, I said, now, we've looked at number one, with the unhealthy emotion. You said shame and condemnation. The second thing was you identified the unhealthy thoughts you were thinking. What is everybody thinking about me now that they knew about my affair? I said, all right, number three, identify God's truth. So I took him back to these different verses and we wrote them down. It's important that you write these down. I said, but here's the last one, number 4. And if you choose not to do this, nothing is going to change. Renew your mind with that truth. I don't care whether you write it down, whether you record it and keep listening to it, whether you write it on your mirror, whether you write it on your hand, whether you put it on your rear view mirror. Here's what I want you to think about in 2025, because God has amazing plans for you for this year. But you need to understand that the enemy wants to thwart those. So he is going to come after you with everything he can, every lie he possibly can do, everyone trying to discredit you, everyone trying to put you down because of your lack of performance or whatever it would be, or you're going to be putting yourself down because of these things. Don't buy into it. This is how you declaw the lies of the enemy. So as you begin to move into this year, I want you to get a little notebook. I'm actually writing a workbook for this right now for guys, but that's another time. What you can do is get a notebook and you write down what is the unhealthy emotion and you put it there so you can see it, okay? Remember, if it lines up with the deeds of the flesh, you know that there's a lie twisted in with the thought you're thinking. So number 2 is then, what am I thinking? What's the unhealthy thought? It's unhealthy because it lines up with the deeds of the flesh. And as you go through this process, what's going to be neat is you go to number 3 and you identify the truth. What does God say? You're going to begin to notice those lies begin to no longer have that grip on you that they once had, right? Those wounds that you've had begin to heal up. you begin to see yourself through the eyes of the one who made you, through the God lens, rather than through the eyes of others. And as you begin to renew your mind, that's going to begin to change, transform your behaviors, the way that you even see others who have been wounded, rather than feeling your need to judge and put them down or lash back out. You begin to see life through their story, their wounds. And so now maybe rather than going to them and saying, yeah, I heard about that in your life, saying, hey, you know what? I'm sorry you went through that. I really do care about you. And I'd love to see you get back on your feet again. How can I be a part of that? Which one feels right? To throw somebody under the bus, or to be able to be there and bandage them back up and say, I'm going to help you get back on your feet again through the love and the grace of Jesus Christ. 2025 can be an amazing year, guys, and we can lead people to Christ, because what does everybody really want to know? Do you care about me? Do you see me? Regardless of whatever my past was, do you see potential in me? You think about that with the kid, who's trying to impress his father. Dad, did you see how fast I ran? Did you see how high I jumped? Dad, did you see that buck that I shot? Remember, your worth and value will never come from your performance or anybody else's opinion. It comes from the one who made you. You are his beloved. You are 100% complete in Christ, and no one, not even the enemy, can take that away from you. He's going to try. But these are 4 things that I wanted to give you to start off the new year with, to be able to remember, to work through, to make you as strong as you can possibly be, to be fit for the kingdom, as it says in 2 Thessalonians. Father God, we thank you for this opportunity every single week on this Sunday night prayer time to be able to get messages from so many different people that they have their own story. So we get to see through so many different lenses. And the beautiful thing is we get to see your glory through everybody's story, that your grace is sufficient. Your love encompasses everything, and that you have a plan for our lives. Father, for 2025, I am just asking that you help these men not only get on their feet, be able to renew their own minds so that they can be as strong. Remember the presence of sitting in warriors, those conversations are different. And that's what other men are going to see. When we don't need to use shame and condemnation, but anymore we can come to them and say, you are loved by God. Your sin didn't change your righteousness because that was given to you by God. Now, let's walk through the lies that you've been buying into that got you into this place and make you fit for the kingdom. Thanks, God, for meeting us right here, for giving us your tools, your weapons against the enemy. May we be mature and complete, not lacking in anything as we move into this new year. Remind us who we really are. And remember this, guys, when a man knows who he is in Christ, that he's been created in the image of the living God, when he is no longer held captive by the opinions of others or cares whether he lives or dies, that man is now extremely dangerous for good, because he's been unleashed by the one who made everything there is. You are loved. Happy New Year.